Today, I'm giving you my exact step-by-step method to paint not just one, but two watercolor winter trees. You're gonna learn how to paint a glowing pine tree, an evergreen tree. And yes, this is my signature subject. Some of you even have called me the Pine Queen. So you might consider me as somewhat of an expert in this subject, and you will also learn how to paint beautiful, delicate, graceful, bare winter trees. And yes, I always use both of them together in my landscapes in many ways because they pair so well together. I also love how they create contrast, drama, and atmosphere. Listen, I've seen a lot of artists struggle with painting pine trees. Some of them look really watered down and overworked. Some of them, they attempt to look like pine trees, but there's not that personality and characters that evergreen trees have. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you the exact brush technique I use to get that beautiful natural ruffled edges of pine trees and evergreen trees. You will learn how to use just two values to make your trees pop and look lively, but without overblending. You'll also see the graceful brush and frankly one of the most underrated brushes in a watercolor artist's kit that I use for these beautiful, graceful, loose branches. And you will also learn about the most common mistakes people make when they're painting bare winter trees and how to fix them fast. Welcome to day 5 of the Watercolor Trees and Foliage Challenge, where you and I are painting trees across all 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and today, winter. So if you haven't watched all the rest of the seasonal trees tutorials yet, then make sure you go catch it after you watch this video, because each one builds your foundational watercolor skills step by step, one on top of the other. And remember that this challenge is not just a YouTube tutorial playlist. This is in fact a beautifully designed full creative experience. So if you want all of the rest of the goodness that comes with this challenge, then make sure you've signed up with the link in the description so that you can grab the daily companion emails for accountability, the workbook with the updated supplies list, extra painting tips, the reference picture for the next part of this challenge, all the good stuff. It's in the description. Okay, let's paint some magical winter trees. Today, I'm going to be painting in my Blue Pine Arts paper block. And this one is the 220 GSM variety with 100% cotton paper. But if you want thicker paper, we also have the 270 GSM one, and you can find out more about it with the links that I've put below. And I'm going to dive right in. And I really love painting and experimenting on paper blocks because I don't have to mess about with masking tape. The paper is already glued on all 4 sides and I can just dive right in and start painting. I know you're here, most of you are here to learn how to paint expressive, lively looking pine trees and spruce trees like this. So let's dive right in. For these 2 types of trees, I'm going to be using my Silver Black Velvet round number 8 brush. Okay. And you can use any round brush as long as it has a nice tip like this. And then I'm using my Rosemary & Co. Rigger brush. I mean, you've already seen it in the other tutorials in this challenge, but again, they're going to be dead useful to paint these bare winter trees. And as for the colors, I'm going to be digging into my trusty Trupti's Signature 24 palette. This is my own signature selection of 24 colors. And you can see just how well used this is because I've been using the same palette for the last more than 2 years, I would say. And the colors have been lasting for a long time, except of course for cobalt blue, which I use the most apparently. And specifically, today I'm going to be using sap green. Let me actually demonstrate that to you. So this is my swatch book. This is like another version of my Blue Pine Art sketchbook, and I always use these to make color notes and swatches and test colors and techniques and all that sort of stuff. So let me sort of share with you the exact shades that I'm going to be using. So for the pine tree and the evergreens, I'm going to use our moss green. You can use sap green for this. Okay, so this is going to be my light tone. And then I'm actually just gonna use two tones in this, the light tones and dark tones for these trees. Because I don't know, I'm in the mood for it and I'm not in the mood for using the three tones. And I also want to see what happens when I paint with just that. So again, you can choose to use the three-tone method that I showed you for the summer trees. And for the darker tone, I'm going to use this stunning, stunning forest green. Again, all the paints are listed in the link below. So sap green, forest green. And for the bare winter trees, I'm going to use burnt umber, which is just the most beautiful granulating brown color. I might also drop in at the base over here. I really love dropping in some of the dark love hematite because it is so beautiful and dark and chocolatey and reminds me of the color of the soil here in the Canadian Rockies again. And it just granulates in the most stunning, stunning way. And then I might just also, I don't know, go for some Indus blue and combine it with the forest green here and there just to like change different colors, you know. I make a lot of intuitive color choices when I'm painting. So when I'm filming these tutorials, I have to be very mindful of listing all of the colors out for you guys. But really just go for the colors that you already have that match these colors. All right, let's set the sketchbook aside and let's dive right in. Okay, so when I see most beginners paint their evergreen trees, they usually go with this approach where they take a really weak color like this here. It's too watery and they also make like really tiny, timid little puddles and they barely fill their brush with the pigment and they go in and they make the tree trunk like this. And then with the same weak color, they go in and, you know, they take a very, very watery load of the paint on their brush and then they start sort of making it look like a skeleton. And I get it, you know, in the beginning, it can feel so hard to paint evergreen trees. And so this horizontal movement, yeah, it doesn't make the tree look alive and expressive. So what do? The first trick is we take a nice juicy load of the color on a palette. Okay, so we want to go for milk, sort of like a cream consistency, and get a good load of color. But at the same time, you want to get the color, excess color off of your brush. And we're going to combine three different ways of painting spruces and evergreens. All right. So first things first, using the tip of your brush, you're going to learn how to paint just the top half of the tree trunk. Okay. But for this practice, you're going to bring it all the way down. And then the next thing you're going to learn to do is to use the tip of your brush to just make it dance like this. So you're using the tip, but you're also pressing it down and lifting it up. So make tiny little marks like this, and then make slightly bigger marks like this by pressing your brush down a little bit more. Do you see that? So go ahead and make some bigger marks as well, where you're pressing the brush down and then lifting it up like this. We're just making the marks for now, all right? And then the third thing you're going to do is learn how to make little marks like this. And then as you come down, you want to make it slightly bigger and bigger and connect with each other. So you want a cone sort of a shape going on over here. Just like this, right? We're just sort of trying to make our marks into a cone. And then all we do is combine all these three different elements to paint our pine tree. So I'm going to do this by bringing in a nice juicy load of this moss green. And then I'm going to start painting this tree by just painting the top of the tree trunk, just like this. And then I'll start making these teeny tiny little marks dancing the tip of my brush. Okay, and if you feel like there's too much of a paint puddle, the easiest trick is to get a paper towel or a piece of cloth and just dab the excess paint from your brush. And then as you come down, press your brush a little bit more. And you're pressing and using the side of your brush and flicking it up. Don't be afraid to use the side of your brush. I see far too many artists just niggle around with the tip of their brush, which is important, but the side of your brush is where you cover a lot more of your paper with a lot less effort. And what's really happening here is the beautiful cold press rough texture of this paper is giving me these ruffly edges. So you're going to see this is going to be a lot harder to do on hot press paper. And this is why cold press paper is so preferred by other artists. Now I'm going to quickly bring in the dark tones and start dropping in the shadows while this is still wet. And again, notice how I'm bringing in a creamier consistency of paint. I'm not dropping like super wet paint. And you can see on my palette here. And I'm only dropping the shadows here in the center as well as at the bottom. Right? And voila, just like that, you have a beautiful three-dimensional looking evergreen pine tree. Now, of course, you can just make a really nice dark and, you know, a dark green version of this. Say you just want to paint a silhouette. And so you can go in and just paint the tip just like that. And I'm going to start with this beautiful forest green. Okay. Now let's make this one a little less lush than this is. So what I can do is just with the tip of my brush, I can bring in these thinner branches, right? Vary the directions and the angles of these branches. And I can go in, oh, there's a little hair here. Okay, I can go in and start making these little ruffles here. Again, using the tip of my brush to make it dance, right? Painting some here in the center as well. And notice how I sort of use the side of the brush. I use the texture of the paper to my advantage. And then once I bring this down, okay, let's say I want to make it look even more natural. So I can even just bring in some bare branches here at the bottom, just with the tip of my brush. And again, we painted a really joyful, happy pine tree or a spruce tree. Sometimes I use them both interchangeably. Like all evergreen trees in my book are pine trees. And I know it's not the right anatomically correct term. But when I first started painting these trees, I was in South India. And for a long time, I just thought all the evergreen trees were pine trees. So there you have it. This is how you paint a beautiful evergreen tree. Now let's go ahead and paint these bare trees. Okay. So in order to do that, I'm going to switch over to my size 1 rigger brush. So for this, I'm going to bring in a nice juicy load of burnt umber. Okay, now let's bring in some blue just to make it a little bit darker. I might just even mix some green in this. I don't know. I'm just sort of playing with colors today because I'm not in the mood of following a lot of rules. But at the same time, I also keep the basic rules of nature in mind, right? Let's paint some of these trees. And again, the direction to paint these bare trees is the same as when I showed you how to paint the tree trunks and the branches in the summer tree tutorial, right? You want to pay attention to the angles of the branches with respect to the tree trunk and with respect to each other. When you're painting a winter tree, you want to start off with a nice thicker base like this, right? Usually it helps to hold the rigger brush at the back like this, because the thing about a rigger brush is the longer hair of it, it just makes the brush move by itself. And I find it really hard to explain to people, and you really got to sort of, try it for yourself to see. And then from the trunk, because remember that each branch is emerging and growing from the trunk. So you want to make it organically glow this way, and you can even change the direction a little bit. Okay. But a lot of the time, if you're sort of making the branches a little too disparate like this, then it doesn't look natural. It doesn't look full. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to paint a graceful base of the trunk like so. Okay. And then I'm going to bring in the angle of this a lot closer with each other. Okay. And then continuing with this, we're going to continue doing this angle. And here at the top, you're going to start using just the tip of your brush to make these fine lines. And again, keep the angle between the branches and the twigs at the end really close with each other. And you see how this looks so much more natural and organic. Let's create another one here. So as you go to the top of the tree, basically, that's where these branches get a lot thinner, a lot more crowded at the top, right? And this makes a winter tree look so much more natural and evocative and expressive. And it ties in really well when you want to paint loose and expressive landscape, but still make the nature look lifelike, but without having to realistically paint with painstaking details. You know what I mean? So let's try that with burnt umber here. Okay. We're going to start off by creating a nice base. And again, I'm pressing the brush down to get that. And again, you can see just the beautiful texture of the paper. Oops, I think I made the tree trunk a little too thick. And for the rigger brush, you want to sort of load it up properly, because I feel like when you use cream consistency to paint this, then it just becomes a little bit more tricky. Okay, so I'm putting in the main trunks and branches of this in the place. Okay. And then we can just go off and start putting in the thinner branches here at the top. And this part just tends to be so meditative. um, And again, this is where I go quiet and I have to remind myself that, oh my gosh, you're here in the studio with me. So, you know, I gotta keep providing you with commentary and instructions and all that sort of stuff. But I like it. I enjoy spending this time with you and painting with you and showing easy ways to paint winter trees. So this is how you paint a winter tree. Now, I'm going to show you a quick way of how I paint this really expressively to put these two elements together. So I usually go in, paint my pine tree, and I just sort of like move really quickly because I don't want to spend too much time overthinking this stuff. And also you have to remember that I've painted probably like thousands of these pine trees since the very beginning of my career. So if you're not getting it, if you're not as fast as me, don't be too hard on yourself, please, especially if you haven't put in the brush miles, right? So brush miles are just where you're showing up and you're putting in the brush miles, you're putting in the work, you're putting down the marks. And the more you do it repetitively, the easier it gets because this is all muscle memory, right? At one point, it's not like I'm working really hard. My brain knows what to do. And also because I use these paper and these brushes and all these tools for a very, very long time, I kind of know what I'm doing and I use all of this stuff almost intuitively, you know? Sometimes I go in and vary the color of my pine trees. I bring in some of this beautiful phthalo turquoise. And I'm like, I don't know, I feel like painting trees like this today. And it also depends on what I'm feeling like feeling like in the what I'm in the mood for. On some days, today I'm really not in the mood of perfecting anything. Okay, here I'm dropping in some dark love hematite just because it is such a fantastically beautiful granulating color. And I'm just creating some rocks, some textures. The trick I've noticed is when you flick your brush upwards for your evergreens, it just works really well. And I'm just letting the wet in wet of the tree and the earth over here blend into each other. So once I've painted them, then I usually go in with my rigger brush and I'm able to go in and start dropping in a winter tree right about here. And it's because of these angles that I keep, they just end up looking so much more natural, so beautiful. So maybe this one is peeking out from behind the tree here, right? Maybe another branch is peeking out here. So notice how playful you can get with a rigger brush when you're more loose with it. See that? And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this exercise. Combining both of these in my elements has just given me space to make so many beautiful expressive paintings. So let me give you a little look at them. So this one, obviously, it just turned out so beautifully. And this here is a meditative landscape that I had painted. And you can see how I've used that tree technique right over here to combine both of them. And this one has created such a beautiful mystical quality. And I've also splattered in some of our gold, our Kuber's gold watercolor paint. And this gives the illusion of fireflies. And I think for this one, I used our copper, and I also combined them in my Northern Lights. And really, I just love painting pine trees like this because they make my landscapes look so alive and so beautiful. So if you want to learn how to paint these pine trees, but within full landscapes like this, all in under 1 hour, then check out my Enchanting Watercolor Landscapes Masterclass bundle. I've linked it below. I've also, if you're a beginner and you're like, I've painted a lot of beginner level landscapes like this, Trupti, I want just a little bit more complicated stuff so that I can find my own style, then check out Mastering Watercolor Landscapes. I've linked both of them below. But really, just have the best fun practicing these trees. And again, put in the brush miles and you'll get where you want to be with your watercolor trees. So your homework for today is to practice both of these different trees and share your results with me inside of the Blue Pine Arts Creative Club Facebook group. And everything else you need is right there in the description box below. And I'll see you over in the next tutorial. Until then, happy painting.